Hey everyone, Sean here, and welcome to this video. This is the first Hawk Talks video of 2025. I guess I just thought I'd bring that up. I wanted to talk about something in relation to Genshin Impact, and more specifically involving with the situation with the FTC finding them $20 million for pretty much tricking the audiences, including the younger side of its audiences, into buying the microtransactions through the dark tactics. I believe that's the term they sort of used in their statement. But um, Hoyoverse went ahead and paid it off, and basically they pretty much said through the statement of Cognosphere that these accusations, while they are false, we're just going to go ahead and get the settlement out of the way. They just drop that money like nothing, I guess, and move on from there. Saying that we will be more transparent on how these systems work and what they're really dealing with, and which potentially could mean a number of things for the future of Genshin, but possibly these gacha games in the long run of things. I do have quite a few things to say about it, but I'll try to break it down as much as I can in a digestible manner. But I have quite a bit to say, so it could be a long video. Just kind of putting that warning out there. So I don't want to see any comments about like, oh yeah, this is 30 minutes, blah blah blah, whatever. So I'm just gonna just go off um, how I feel. So anyway, so the what has been explained, obviously. So we have Genshin Impact in question by the FTC, who have been alleging them that they've been using dark practices and tactics to trick the audiences, including children. So okay, and yes, that's been settled, all that stuff, pretty much. So the next question for this situation here is who is ultimately responsible for this situation, right? And I definitely do feel that this is a multitude of answers. There's definitely layers to it, and it's not quite black and white here, at least in some areas anyway. There's pretty much imagine like a canvas, and literally some people threw some black and white paint. And so you're going to have these areas that are going to be black. You're going to have other areas that are going to be white, but you're going to have a big area also that's going to be gray. So that's kind of what this sort of is, at least in my perspective anyway. As someone who has been playing these games for a good amount of time at this point, starting from 2015, and then up to the point of Genshin Impact and even ZZZ or Zenless Zone Zero as one of the latest. So, if not the latest. So who is really ultimately responsible is what I'm trying to get at here, and I feel like one of one of the obvious responsible parties is of course Hoyoverse. They are the ones who developed this particular game with this system, and of course across their other Hoyoverse games. Of course, the existence is thanks to that party, of course. If it weren't for this, it would have been not a situation, I guess, in this particular case. So you could argue that, yeah, Hoyoverse is responsible for bringing this into existence in the first place. Especially with Genshin Impact being so popular, it was a huge hit during the pandemic era, I guess you could say. COVID, whenever that hit, it was pretty much the perfect storm for games like Genshin Impact to come in when everyone was still relatively indoors, and it definitely took off to the point where the word "gotcha" now is more of a household name than ever for the gaming community in general. The word "gotcha" is forever kind of embedded into our vocabulary. It's not just loot boxes anymore; it's gotcha, right? Along with the words like live service and so on and so forth. So thanks to Genshin Impact, that sort of system or live service style, if you will, became very, very popularized to the point where a number of other games have tried to ride this wave. A number of them failing and a number of them perhaps succeeding, but it's a mixed bag. Genshin Impact definitely left some sort of impact, so naturally you're gonna have a lot of players from various age ranges, including adults, but also including younger audiences, of course, teenagers as well. So you're naturally going to have various results with how people go about the gacha system, which that of itself is toxic. It always has been. It's riding on the wave of gambling. It plays around with people's psychological sort of well-being to make them feel like they need this or they want this, and they pull on those various characters, right? From not only from a gameplay standpoint, but from a more of a emotional standpoint as well. Hoyoverse has been doing a very effective job of making these characters very likable from a story standpoint or personality standpoint. Whether they're cute, they're badass, they're just wholesome, just all around likable in some ways. They all have their own charms, ranging from the males, just being uber powerful to just having, of course, the waifus or the female characters just being just, straight up fan service, or sexy or hot, whatever, right? Right. Sometimes they're just there just to be hot. Let's not lie about that, or let's not deny about that anyway. And that does a very good job making people pull for these characters. Of course, Hoyoverse has done a very, very effective job doing so with lots of colors. Let's just put it that way. And of course, that exploits the minds of these younger individuals very much so, to the point where the multiplying effect even amplifies more because of how naive these players are. And so this is kind of where the next party comes in that are, I think, at least, are responsible for this situation as well. And that's really the parents, right? The parents have done a pretty poor job of not obviously not everyone, but for those who are involved in this sort of situation where they just kind of like gave their phones or iPads as a sort of go-to to just stop their children from whining or whatever, and winding up not giving them the proper attention, and of course the proper sort of teachings and understandings of what life has in store for them, right? And that of course includes the value of money, the financials, right? The real value of budgeting yourselves and how it's going to affect them later on, right? You know, um, and of course, people have different experiences. They grow up in different environments, right? So the results are going to definitely vary. And we all come from different walks of life, so we are going to have different philosophies and such like that. But I think just to kind of get to the meat of things of this sort of bit is that, yeah, we have to be responsible to sort of pass on our knowledge and experiences to the younger generation, especially parents, of course. The parents are definitely responsible for their children and what they learn and such. They place a very important role in those things, but instead they neglect on that by just giving their iPads, their iPhones, whatever. And a lot of those situations, these children or teenagers, knowing how knowledgeable they are with technology nowadays, they can unlock the phone pretty quick, and they will find these games, because they're free, have access to them, play them, and then whenever the time comes whether to play more of the game or get more out of the game, they're going to pull or make that purchase, right, with these in-game currencies, whatever they're involved. And whenever their minds are exploited, they're going to bust out whatever is available to them, including the credit cards of these parents, right, of their parents. It definitely makes me question, at least, of how these children are having access to these credit cards, right? And ultimately, I think it's the responsibility or lack thereof from the parents. So this causes definitely the sort of situation involving children spending thousands of dollars just to try to get that character to be super powerful enough to get through the end game content when you really don't need to. You can definitely get by depending on how your luck is when it comes to building your characters with the artifact system or armor pieces or weapons and stuff like that. Very much luck based, mind you, and that also further exploits the mind and such like that of the need to be more powerful, right? So that you just get through end game content that much more easily, right? There's just a lot of things about gacha that really need to be understood when before they get into these things, especially children or teenagers, right? That's like the perfect storm or age, right, for them to be old enough to have access to such things, but then do it in a way that really causes these volatile situations, right? So again, it all revolves around the responsible parenting, but in those situations, there is a lack thereof, right? So that's why I feel personally that, a lot of this is on the parents. Because again, yeah, these games exist, but then this happens because the parents kind of just neglect the neglectance of the parents also contributes to this situation. And that's why these children can just grab the credit cards, especially when the credit card is in the phone, right? Trying to make things all easy, all in one, right? Especially those Apple wallets and stuff like that. Make it all the more easy to have access to them. Adding to the point of the parenting situation, I do feel like there's a lot of finger pointing as well in nowadays, especially what's been going on around the world as of recent. Lots of finger pointing does happen in many situations, and this is no exception. The parents want to point it towards the games. Oh, it's the game's fault. Oh, whatever. They exploit these things. Like, well, right? Like, what? The game didn't um, give the kids the credit card. You did. You are responsible for your credit card and where it goes, right? And that's the thing about these things, right? There's a lot of responsibility to be had. That definitely is a point as well, I think. But of course, the other party in question, of course, is the player themselves. Um, Ultimately, it definitely winds down to just common sense and which harks back on, yes, the parenting too, but it also ultimately is up to the individual to whether to pull on these characters or not. So the player themselves can moderate, but they just don't allow themselves to because of various things and what's going on in their mind, where they come from. All these factors do come into play, which is why again this is such a gray area, right? But yes, ultimately, I think it's not just Hoyoverse that are responsible um, for this situation alone. It's the parents, the players, consumers, along with players, right? Consumers, and other such things. But again, yes, gacha of itself is super toxic. It can exploit the mind very much so, like gambling, But these things exist. They've existed around for that long, and it's up to us to be responsible to have these things um, in moderate or in a moderate manner, right? If you're able to moderate everything in your life, then you can have a pretty healthy um, a future for yourself, right? And have a just a fun time in that sense. But not everyone's so perfect, so of course these situations do come up. I have plenty of friends who are all over the place, right? On those scales. You have the person who just doesn't care, but of course you have the other person who absolutely just drops money like nothing. But there are also people who just absolutely just like spend their time, sit down and spend their time grinding the hell out of this game to the point where they even like neglect on all the other things in life, including their social life, right? It's a powerful thing. It's a very very volatile thing that can really potentially change people's lives in some ways, right? But of course, what doesn't help is the fact that social media sort of rewards that sort of behavior as well, right? So could you blame it on social media as well? Absolutely, right? I think they have a hand at this situation as well. And I'm not trying to say that these content creators and such like that who are very famous for playing these gotcha games are at fault for it or anything like that. But um, you know, say what you will, but there is a bit of exploitation involved with, showing off your polls, seeing the numbers, and you just keep going and going and going and such. I don't want to dive into that too much, but I just wanted to say that social media does play a hand at this too as well because it creates more of that FOMO that you definitely experience in these gotcha games. Now, when it comes to the FTC going after just Genshin in particular in this situation, I felt like this is pretty hypocritical because if you are going to go after games like Genshin, then why haven't we seen companies like EA being called out for it? Because I feel like games like Madden or FIFA and such like that should be looked at because I don't think those games have a pity system, right? And even Blizzard to an extent, although Blizzard is all cosmetic and other such companies as well, right? But they still practice the same things or very similar things, which is FOMO and all that stuff. Especially when you're like the one person in the group of your friends who does not have the skin, and so that also plays into the mind of these players and creates such an influence from said environment, whatever, right? But this is, of course, from the responsibilities of the game company as well, right? Um, Again, partially, but not entirely, right? But again, if you're going to go after Hoyoverse, then I would like to see them going after EA, going after, so on and so forth. I think even Ubisoft is at fault for that too, to an extent. Maybe Riot, right? And, the list goes on. I've heard also that Epic was also involved with the FTC, I think, and that's all cosmetic for sure. But again, it does kind of practice some of those dark tactics, right? And including playing around with the whole FOMO thing, in the end, because that's how you get these players to buy the cosmetics in the first place, at least to a large extent, to feel like, yeah, you're missing out on these costumes. They're limited time. Oh, if you don't get these, they're gonna be gone for at least a long time, if not ever. At least that's what the players feel like. And so those dark tactics have to be looked at if you're going to go after games like Genshin, if you're going to put it like that. I think I mean Blizzard with like Diablo with their mobile game, right? Was pretty bad. Diablo 4, I think, takes those sort of practices as well, if I'm not mistaken. So again, if you're gonna go after them, go after all those other companies too. But you know, EA has also have had their fair share of that situation too, but not with the FTC, but with another group in Europe. They had a hearing, and that's where the whole surprise mechanics term came from, right? I think a lot of us gamers know about that, and I think they need to be called out even more, especially by the FTC, and be fined and have their due diligence, right, and put that in their plate, and hopefully they answer to that. So I definitely do feel, to at least an extent, that the FTC is being a little very selective in the situation, because I haven't heard anything about them going after EA. So I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong. If they have, then that's great. But no, in this situation, we're talking about Genshin here, and it's kind of funny to me because Cognosphere put out the statement basically saying, yeah, it's kind of inaccurate, but whatever kind of vibe. They just paid off like nothing, because it's funny because some of these banners just make 20 mil like nothing. That's like the crazy and scary thing about these games, of how much they get the money, right? And so they can pay off that fee like, meh, right? We'll just put out another banner. That should cover it, right? You know, it seems like it's like a Tuesday or something to them. Just another Tuesday, whatever. Next, you know. I mean, yes, obviously 20 mil is a lot of money to the majority. But if you're a company like Hoyoverse, where you can just put out these banners and still and make that money back within 20 days or whatever, then it's like, yeah, I mean, that's a whole different ball game at that point. And I wanted to point this out too, because it's so ironic that Genshin was the game that helped me moderate my gotcha spending. Whenever I play games like Fate Grand Order, it was pretty unhinged by comparison looking back on that stuff. You know, of course, this is all calculated, which is very important, right? You have to make sure you budget yourself, and I've only done the big spending on one occasion per year, right? And that was just by happenstance during Evo, right? Summer. So naturally, the summer banners was when I went a little more crazy than the usual. Although I have a friend where he still plays Fate Grand Order and spends money like nothing, right? Until he gets that unit, which is crazy, because that game, it still has a improper pity system, in my opinion. It's by comparison to Hoyoverse, man, it's kind of night and day if you really think about it. Which is something I do want to point out and address, because I've always felt like Hoyoverse was pretty clear on like the chances and stuff like that, of the percentages and all that stuff, but maybe just putting a wall of text thinking, oh yeah, people are gonna understand this, I think that maybe that's where they fall short, and maybe that's where they are fault at that, but the percentages are there. Like it literally says like it's like a 0.03% to get these characters slash weapons or whatever, but um, you know, they've implemented the pay system where you will eventually get that banner character. So in a sense, this is one of the more easy sort of live service gotcha loot box games, if you really think about it, because how many other gotcha games that, let's just say, aren't agent oriented, do offer a pity system of some kind, right? Does EA offer a pity system for their games? Do Blizzard offer some sort of pity system for theirs? We don't know that. I don't think they've really pointed that out in their uh, sort of tutorial, or whatever you want to call it, the guide, or whatever you want to say. Because see, at least Hoyo games offer that right then and there, right? They even talk about it in their live streams and a lot of stuff about the pay system, how they've been enhancing it, how they've been changing it, right? Especially for the weapon banners, right? Kind of crazy, right? Of how they've been much more transparent by comparison to such other games. And yet here we are talking about the FTC, being, um, you know, not transparent, not being clear of how these things sort of work. But I guess they have to be more clear at the end of the day, right? Maybe they are not clear enough, but by comparison, it's kind of crazy, you know. But that's pretty much the major things I wanted to point out for Genshin and such other games. Again, Hoyoverse with Genshin, ZZZ, and Star Rail, right? I felt like I've been moderate with my spending and such like that by comparison to something like Grand Order. So I think that should say something, but that's just my individual experience. Um, so for those who have experienced these gotcha games throughout the years, what are your experiences? How are you with your spending? Are you a free to play player, the low budget? Are you a straight up whale? Right? Because of what this whole ecosystem is about is the whales, right? Um, any of those comments, you can drop it down below. We'd love to read them. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps out, and I do appreciate it. So this has been my Hawk Talks on Genshin versus the FTC, and just gotcha games in general, I guess, and all the betweens and in betweens and such like that. So I think we can have a pretty healthy discussion about who's responsible and how we should go about it with gotcha, right? Because I think everything in moderncy can be healthy, right? As long as we can control ourselves. Because there are many other things out there that are even gotcha that are plenty dangerous or toxic or whatever, but because we are responsible, they're still around and people can have fun with them, right? So that's just my two cents on it, and thank you very much. Hope to see you all in the next video. Ciao now.